I like the Tech for Classical Musicians video. I watched.
Good, good. Did you get some new ideas?
Yeah, although I don't have GarageBand, so I'm wondering if there's a good alternative
Well,
for
wasn't
it.
that what you said with Audacity?
Audacity, would that be okay?
Is
Yeah, GarageBand is Mac specific, and so not everybody's going to be able to use it. But Audacity is also free, and it works for both Windows, Mac, and Linux if you happen to have a Linux computer as well. And they're all the same tools are available in both of them. It's just a different skin on it, just different appearance.
Cool, thank you.
No problem.
So I have a question. So one of the things I'm doing this with a couple of my youth orchestras is making these virtual symphony videos, And one of the problems that I'm running into is I can't find timpani anywhere on GarageBand or anywhere, or I can't find any plugins or anything like that for GarageBand. I'm a Mac person, so I have all Mac software. You got any recommendations for that?
So I don't want to speak out of turn. I'm pretty sure if do you happen to have Logic? If you're, I don't know if you're in that deep in the audio recording world.
I don't have Logic, no.
Um, the oh, I see Doug is saying that
Oh,
is that is that Garriton? Is it the same company as Finale's
Yes,
sound
I could be
engine?
wrong, but there are a ton of there are lots of timpani out there if you look. If you're using any of the standard sequencers, like Performer also has some timpani in there. So I would assume that Pro Tools has it, and I would assume that Logic has it. But I use Finale and Performer, and
okay. I
they both
really
have
should get Finale then. I used to have a very old version of it.
Sibelius might have it as well.
Sibelius. I prefer Finale over Sibelius, but I'll try that next. That'll be.
Can someone just repeat what the person just said? Because I couldn't hear it very well, and I want to make sure we have good audio.
Oh,
Doug,
so
your mic is pretty low, by the way.
My mic.
yeah.
Yeah, your volume's pretty low.
Let me figure out how to
So
turn that up.
I basically I use Sibelius. I also have a notation software called Dorico, and I have Finale as well, just to be able to share files back and forth with people. And my general assessment of the sound engines in all of these things, they're good and they can get you to a place where you can hear your arrangement and get a kind of a sense of it. But when you start getting deeper into GarageBand and Logic share this sample set, the instrument in GarageBand that I think you would find all this stuff is called EXS24. And if you go in through their sample library, basically there's on the left hand side, like the top left corner, there's a library button, and that'll open up a catalog of all of the possible sounds that you could use. I like GarageBand sounds better than the built-in sounds in Finale and Sibelius. I think they're just a little bit higher quality sound sampling. But yeah, I would definitely say the notation software is going to be the easiest way to like get a timpani line to sound, and then you can export audio files from any of those notation platforms and just plug that into your video overall. Um, so search around there. If you don't find it, I actually can like just export the timpani sounds out of my library and send them to you, so you'll have something that sounds decent.
Awesome, yeah.
But timpani's
I'll take a look again in around GarageBand, and I do want to get another copy of like a more recent copy of Finale anyway.
yeah.
But if I've got no success, then I'll certainly reach out to you for sure.
Timpani's challenging because it's hard to get a good sampled sound of a timpani. They need to be able to do a lot of things, and it's very like it's hard to simulate like the sound of different sticks, the sound of different like the tuning sounds that kind of are part of the instrument too. So I think a lot of people shy away from it with timpani because it's like it's very complicated to get the sound just right, and I don't blame them, even though it's kind of leaves us sort of shortchanged a little bit.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Uh, Serrano was wondering about a program called Note Performer, and it says that it works well with Sibelius and Finale. Do you know that program?
I've never used Note Performer. I think my understanding of it, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, that Note Performer is like a simple notation software, but it also sort of does some expressive things to the sound, so that you're not just getting like a very slow speaking string sound every time you play a note, that sort of thing. But I've never gotten into using it personally. I've been using Sibelius since version 2, which is definitely putting a timestamp on me. And I like I said, I keep the other programs around basically so I can move them into Sibelius to work on things. And I'll say, as far as all those notation softwares, which is something I could have probably gotten really deep into in this video, there's also one called MuseScore that's free, that's really, really powerful. It's not yet the most beautiful looking thing, but it actually interacts really well with the other notation softwares. And it also, their website's amazing because people can host all of the arrangements and stuff that they've done. When I go to make a new arrangement, I'll check MuseScore's website first, see if somebody's done something close to that, and then maybe I'll build off of their arrangement. It's super powerful and a really useful piece of equipment. So I'm sorry I don't know a bit more about Note Performer, but I found that over the years all of those programs have sort of drifted towards one. They're all very similar in how they work, and it's just a matter of taste for a lot of people.
I use MuseScore, and I love it. I think it's a really great program.
I recommend it to a lot of people.
Yep.
Yeah.
Everyone else who's on here, I see you, but you can go ahead and turn your video on. You can ask any question you want in the chat, if you can hear me. Hi, Najib. Hey, Chris.
I just want to say, by the way, thanks everybody for checking this video out. I said in the chat over on YouTube that this is like the video that I wanted somebody to make for me, and it's really hard to be comprehensive and to put all the possible information into it. But there are so many things that if you're into that one topic, you can use YouTube and fall down that rabbit hole and explore these topics endlessly. And there's a lot of great resources out there. But for classical musicians, there's like a central set of things that you need, that you want to be able to do. And I wanted to try to put one resource down that has the beginnings of all of those things in it. And, it's a learning experience for everybody. I wasn't as good at this stuff 3 weeks ago as I am now. And even between filming that video and now, I've learned a whole bunch of stuff about microphones and all kinds of technological things that just never would have been taught to me in a bass lesson. And so, anything that I can do to help you guys get a little bit farther, I'm really happy to explore that.
Does anyone have any more questions? Christopher? Gabe?
I have a question.
Yeah?
I don't know whether this was covered as I was leaving and coming back in, but thanks for hosting this. This was really great. One thing is, we're all stuck in our rooms, and I was wondering how much our rooms impact the quality of the recording, and whether there are any sound treatments that you would suggest.
Totally. So what you can see right here, this is a textured foam panel. It's just backed with cardboard, and a friend just lent me that because he had a few too many of them. I've got foam panels in every corner of the room, and then I've got all of my guitar cases, my bass case, and everything in the room. Basically, as much absorbent material as you can get into the room that you're in, the better. What you're going for is a dead room, and of course, that doesn't make sense to us as classical musicians because acoustic is half of the sound, that you're making with your instrument. And we learn all along to try to play in the most resonant spaces possible. Like in school, you're always trying to find the biggest room you can practice in. When you're recording, though, if your room has a given frequency, and all rooms do, they're called modes. Your room will have these different notes that when you play that note, it'll be way louder than the rest of the notes that you could play. And that, when you record that, it sounds really bad. The other factor that is involved in this is how far the microphone is from your recording, like whether you're recording your instrument or your voice. So if I back myself up, you're going to hear more of the reverberations in the room and less of the direct signal. So you want to try to make your room dead, really dead. You could store, looks like you've got like a towel hanging over a drying rack behind you. Like,
It's my bunk bed.
oh, nice. Well, I mean, having beds, having bedding, having more blankets, more towels, things like that are what I would recommend. That, like the closet door, you could hang like a towel or a blanket over that. And the more you can deaden the vibrations, the more you're going to get a pure signal when you record. And from there, then you want to add reverb and things back into it afterwards to try to make it sound like you're in the space you wish you were in. And so, yeah, I don't want to pan the camera over that way because it looks horrible. But I have as much stuff there as I possibly can stand and still be able to like move through the room because I want it to be really dead in here.
Can I actually add something to that too? I've been telling a lot of students the other thing to keep in mind with that is, you know, when we rehearse, especially in orchestra or, well, anytime we practice, we usually think about filling up a large space because we're practicing towards performing in a large space like a concert hall, right? And so then you're tempted to, when you turn the microphone on, you're ready to go, to really play out like you would in a big room. But that can really very easily overwhelm your microphone. You want to play your actual playing to be for the space that you're in when you're recording.
That's super true. One of the most important parts of the recording, like signal chain, is a compressor. And the idea behind a compressor is that when we play, you see, if you look at the waveform of you playing, you'll see all these sharp peaks where the attack was really strong, and then you'll see it decay away to, you know, sort of a line in the middle. And a compressor will help tame the difference between the peaks and the regular stuff. What it can do, the more you turn up a compressor, the more compressed things get. They get flat, and you lose the dynamics. But a compressor is a really good way to, you know, if you just have some occasional really loud notes, it'll soften that a little bit and keep it from getting out of control, and you'll still have your nuance and your dynamics and everything in your playing. So the compressor is a powerful tool, and you can overuse it and you can flatten everything out, but a little bit of compression, especially I think for brass instruments, things with like hard attacks that you can get soft right after that. That's a really important part of the making everything sound right equation. And I totally agree with Rachel. You know, when you're capturing an instrument up close, there's some grit, there's some ugly stuff that we all know from playing. We hear it all the time. And if you're really cranking, you don't hear any of that out in the hall. But if you have a microphone 2 inches away from your bridge, they're going to hear that. So playing kind of to the middle of your dynamic range, focusing on the tone and the sweetness of tone, that's crucial to getting a good sounding recording. And I talked to a guy who does mixing for a living today, and he basically said if you don't get it right while you're playing it into the microphone, it's so much harder to clean it up after the fact. You know, the best thing you can do is get a really clean, pristine take straight into the mic, and then from there do a minimal amount of processing. And a lot of what we end up doing is because we're, you know, trying to fix our mistakes in post-production.
Any more questions?
I have an equipment question.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, I don't want to hog this, but this is something I'm thinking about. So a lot of microphones are going to USB.
Yeah.
But a lot of our smartphones have USB-C, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the question is, I think there's not a lot of 3.5 millimeter headphones out there right now.
Mm-hmm.
So would you suggest going to the route of getting a mic with an XLR output to 3.5, or would you suggest getting a USB mic going from USB to USB-C?
So and this ties actually into a question that I see Doug asked about my audio interface, which for reference is it's a Focusrite Scarlett. Mine's the Solo, so it's the smallest version. It just has like an XLR input for microphones and a quarter-inch jack, which is for like guitars typically. So whenever you're recording from a microphone to the computer, you're going from analog signals, meaning like the actual physical sound, to a digital signal. And your sound, when you get it into the computer, is only going to be as good as the conversion that takes place between your like microphone and the computer. So a good audio interface is the best way to get the best sound. And when I say a good audio interface, you know, most of the things that you could buy out there, you could spend as much money as you ever could want on an audio interface. There's no limit to how much cash you can sink into it. You just probably don't want the cheapest thing you could possibly find. You want one or two notches above that at least. And then from there, it's sort of your own economic situation. Now, when you're talking about a USB mic, that USB mic has to do the work of the microphone and the interface at the same time. So it's not only is it capturing the signal, the movement of air, but it's also turning it into digital signal. So if you then insert a USB-C converter into your signal chain, it's one more way for things to kind of get downgraded or shifted or changed, and you're losing fidelity. You're losing the authenticity of the sound. So your best bet is XLR. That cable is an analog signal chain, and then you plug that into your interface, it digitizes it, good to go. And it's a really simple thing. You're only plugging the USB cable in at that point and then plugging your XLR into it. And that's the best way to do it. Now, if you have an XLR...
Uh-oh.
Your interface disagreed with your answer there. No,
Yeah,
Trying to censor me.
like you talking about it like that.
So yeah, my thinking is be wary about using like using too many adapters in your chain. If you have an XLR to 3.5 millimeter plug-in, that's a good way. You know, that's hardwired, so there's not much going on there. But you still, as far as I know, I've never tried plugging that into my phone because my phone doesn't have a headphone jack. But then your phone is handling the conversion from analog to digital. So again, depends on your phone. You know, as these things age, it's probably going to be less and less feasible to do that. And of course, they're doing away with those things too. But as far as I'm concerned, I think if you have the capacity to plug into your computer rather than your phone, the tools are more accessible and easy, and you're gonna end up paying less for them, and they're probably gonna be more powerful. The processing power is stronger. So, you know, I would probably look in that direction. Like a decent microphone is a really big asset, even when they throw a bunch of static into the Zoom call. You know, it's still worth having that thing. And by the way, I set aside. I've got these two different microphones here. This is a Shure SM7B, and this or something like it is on tons of commercial recordings. It's not the cheapest piece of equipment in the world. What's that, Rachel?
It's also a Shure. It's an older one, KSM 44.
Yeah.
So
anything like that. I mean, if you were holding this right now, it's got serious heft to it. You can basically feel a bit of quality in your microphone by how much it weighs. You know, more and better metal means a better microphone. But even the Shure SM57, which is about a $55 microphone, you know, U2 recorded one of their biggest singles with Bono singing into an SM57. You know, it doesn't take a very expensive one, but you got to run it into a decent interface to capture that stuff on your computer. And that's really important. Like your signal chain, the microphone, the cables, the interface, all of that stuff ultimately affects the quality of the recording that you're going to get.
Donna's wondering, with doing all the editing that you're talking about, is that allowed when students are making recordings for auditions?
I don't get asked to, necessarily audit a lot of audition recordings personally. But as far as I'm concerned, people don't want to hear obvious splices in takes. You don't want to try to like throw in a fixed note in between a bunch of notes in a row. And really what that comes down to is it just doesn't sound authentic. It doesn't sound good. And people can kind of hear that more often than not. But I think as far as putting a little bit of reverb on there, I've never sent a recording out that I didn't put a little bit of sweetening on. You're dealing with, at that point, it's almost like a class warfare kind of situation where people who can go and book a hall and get a good recording engineer are going to get into better festivals. And if you are the type of person like I was growing up where you didn't have those resources, it shouldn't be that you can only listen to somebody recording in their bedroom or somebody recording on the Kimmel Center stage. It just doesn't work like that. So I think putting reverb in there, that's really the only thing. Maybe EQ is the other thing that I think would be acceptable. These aren't to make yourself sound better. These are to just fix problems with the recording itself. If you record in a dead space, you want a little bit of, echo, just a little bit of sound like you're in a larger space so that it doesn't sound dead or like right up on the listener. And EQ is as I was saying to Najib, like if you have a boomy room, EQ is something where that you can actually see in the wave where the loud frequencies are. And if you use EQ, you just knock that slider down, you're going to get a smoother sound that's more like what you are actually playing. It's not fixed. It's just, it's corrected so that you're compensating for the circumstances. So, and by the way, if you are going into any recording studio in the world, nothing gets recorded without a compressor and a little bit of EQ. That's a fact. And so being a little bit aware of those things and being willing to try them out, at least to cycle through presets and figure out something that sounds decent, you're empowering yourself, and it's going to go beyond this pandemic and be more about, for the rest of your life, you're going to be making recordings for stuff, whether it's orchestra auditions, summer festivals, or just to share things with friends. You want to be empowered to do that. And I don't think that it should penalize anybody to just use a little bit of sweetening where anybody that has enough money is going to pay somebody to do that for them, and they're already going to have that built in.
Yeah, I agree. But I would stay away from splicing. That is, that's kind of a no-no.
It's disingenuous,
right.
If you're like stitching your stuff together, it doesn't really reflect what you're able to do, and people are going to figure that out sooner or later. I will admit that the first recording I ever submitted for this camp called Domaine Forget, I had helped out a friend who had a recording studio. We went into the studio and I asked him to put his magic on it, and it was the Bottesini Concerto, and I messed some things up on my take. And he's like, we'll just punch it in. We'll just splice in this little bit where you messed up. And, of course I didn't get into the camp that year. It was so obvious what was happening and so not reflective of my actual playing that they were 100% right to not take me, even if I had managed to produce a really high level recording. It was obvious that I wasn't able to get a really clean take right through. And if you can just get a good take, nothing can compensate for a good performance in recording technology.
Najib just asked a question, or said you could also use your local church hall for reverb. Now, so last year my quartet and a pianist played Brahms piano quintet, and a whole concert, but that was one of the pieces at a church in Chestnut Hill that is very ringy. And while you're playing and you're in there, it sounds great. It's a lovely place to listen to music. So last week they put it up on their website as something to show the public. I could not even listen to it because the reverb got so in the way of everything that we were playing that it was just like noise, like just completely you know, I couldn't even tell. But anyway,
And
so
you actually just prompted me to say something which I alluded to in the video, but I didn't really get to elaborate on. Like in acapella, the reason that I turn the reverb all the way off is when you have all that reverberation, it muddies the sound. So
right,
you have the reflections of things off of things. There's late sounds bouncing off.
yeah,
It um, reverb is best used in moderation. And the other consequence of reverb is that it makes you sound softer, because if you're simulating that you're in a really big space, you're in the middle of this big space, and the person that's listening is listening from the wall.
mm,
So it's not the same as just having like this beautiful halo of sound around you. You're adding things in there that you're probably going to regret later. And when things are recaptured in a reverberant space, it's kind of hard to get them out of there. You can't really fix something that already is too washy sounding.
yeah.
That's another point in the category of just put a bunch of junk in your room and record there, rather than try to, fix that problem by going to a bigger space. It seems like it would even things out, but it doesn't necessarily always succeed.
Other questions? Are we authorized to use? Oh yeah, sure. You could use whatever works for you. Yeah.
As far as sound editing goes, I personally don't use GarageBand or Audacity. I did, and I've upgraded to Logic and Pro Tools. Those are expensive things, and they're things to aspire to. I'm using them because I'm getting paid to use them, and people are helping me offset the cost of them by, throwing me work and stuff like that. And when you get in that position, by all means upgrade, and you'll be overwhelmed by the amount of tools that are built into those things. But doing things in like GarageBand is really much simpler than you think, and it's really easy to get into it and play around. And anything else that's out there, there's Fruity Loops, or FL Studio is what it's called now. There's Ableton Live. And I actually put a comment on the YouTube video of links to some of these things, some of the free stuff. Ableton Live is a really great situation to experiment with audio effects and stuff like that. And they're doing a 90-day free trial right now, so you could really get in there and do some damage in 3 months. And I think every classical musician would do well to experiment a little bit with that side of things. You can see, I don't have my bass or the cello that's in this room on display right now. I've got my other toys, and I probably wouldn't have listened to somebody in high school if they had told me, like, you should like practice more guitar, dude. But it's really helped me think about music differently and think about the bass differently. And even just having a MIDI keyboard and being able to mess around with synthesizers, all the kinds of sounds that you can get out of that stuff, it's huge. It's a big part of understanding how sound works, and then being able to manipulate it on your instrument too.
There is an app that I just downloaded the other day called, oops, wait, iReal Pro. And what that is it's got all these, it's like to practice soloing, right? So it's got all these different settings. There's, medium jazz 1, medium jazz 2, which is, medium swing. And then there's stuff in Dorian mode, Lydian mode, all kinds of stuff, right? And as you younger people in here start to learn more and more about theory, I would really encourage you to just try to do stuff like this, on your own, to really cement not just knowing about it academically, but knowing really like how this stuff really works in real time. I play in a band now too. I've played in Argentine tango bands for the past 15 years or so. It's a very, very fun thing to do something in addition to classical music.
And I'll just pile onto that by saying improvisation terrifies me. I'm not like an improv guy, and I'm not necessarily recommending that everybody go out and become like a jazz virtuoso, although there's so much to be gained from learning to think that way. Um, but you can get a lot of mileage out of your classical music skills and the music theory things that you've learned, and still be doing things that aren't classical music. Tango is one of those things. A lot of it's written down, and you can, you can experiment within that genre, playing around with time and
Oh,
these
yeah.
other things. And every single little venture into those things comes back to me on the orchestra stage tenfold. It makes a big difference in who I am as an orchestra musician and as a soloist, just as much as it does like me being able to put together a song made out of loops or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I see Sebastian asking my recommendations for producing your own music. Like I said, I have Logic and Pro Tools when I want to write something myself and I'm like in the experimental or the creative mood. Logic is 100% where I go to do that stuff. Pro Tools is excellent stuff for Pro Tools is great for recording audio. It's great for manipulating audio. But if you're doing stuff with keyboards, with MIDI, and by the way, a lot of people think that MIDI is like those crappy sounds that you get out of old keyboards when you were a kid. MIDI is not that. MIDI is just the being able to control instruments with like electronic signals. Learning all the stuff like that, I think Logic is a really, really nice way to do that, and it comes with a ton of stuff built in. Now it's $200, so it's aspirational. It's something that you work up towards. GarageBand has most of that stuff, and it's free, and you can do just about everything in GarageBand that you would do in Logic. Logic just gets a little bit farther out there, and it has a little bit more advanced stuff, but until you're working with producers and you're like actually going to put stuff out into the world and try to sell it, GarageBand is really going to have everything that you need. I started with something called Cakewalk back in the late 90s. Cakewalk is free now, and I would strongly recommend, any one of these things. They're called DAWs, digital audio workstations. There's a million of them, and there's one for everybody, and they all do the same basic things in different ways. So you should just try stuff out, see what's free, see what has a trial, and experiment to figure out what works for you. And it's a very individual choice.
Cool. What do you recommend to use when also needing video with audition videos?
Yeah, I've been thinking about this a lot. You guys could see in the video that I made, the lighting's kind of not exactly optimal. I have a really nice camera. It's a Zoom Q2 HD. And it's one of the older models that Zoom makes of things, but it is like an HD 1080p camera. The problem is, in this space, it's really dark. And believe it or not, the best results that I get out of video stuff that I own, I have a nice digital SLR camera, and that's the best thing that I use. But I really like the webcam that's built into my computer. I have a laptop with a decent one, and I'm using a iMac, like a desktop Mac, and those are the two best ones for just lighting and being able to just switch it on and start recording. Now, what I would recommend doing is like recording your audio separate from the video, because that camera and the microphone that's built in, they're not the optimal combo. I would rather have this microphone and that camera. So I would be recording separately onto Logic usually, or GarageBand, whatever works for you. And then go into I have iMovie on a Mac. I'm sure there are free programs that come with Windows to do the same thing. QuickTime, actually, which is like a built-in app that comes with Macs, is solid. It really works. And you can also separate the audio track from that really easily. And then you can get in there and mess around with it, put on reverb, take away things, that sort of thing. So I'm doing this stuff post-production. I'm putting this video and the audio back together. And that's the opposite situation. Then again, your phone is going to do a pretty good job of all this stuff. And Gabe, my student who's on this call, has sent me plenty of iPhone video that's been solid and is enough to get across what I'm trying to do. So it depends on the application that you're putting this to as well, whether it's a professional recording or something you're trying to send informally to somebody.
I just bought a little while ago these. I don't want to take it off because I'm afraid like everything's gonna fall down. But it's kind of like, have you ever had professional photos taken and they have those really bright lights with the filter in front of it, right? This is like a mini version of that. It's only about this big around, but it's incredible for light, and a lot of times a well-lit video will go a long way. And you don't want to have to rely so much on time of day or whatever, you know what I mean? So this, I think it was like $25 or something. It's not expensive and it's portable. You could take it to a concert if you ever wanted to use it there or something. So I think it's a wise investment to get a good light.
Super important, by the way, to aim that light at your face and not from behind you, because that
Oh
will
yeah.
accomplish the opposite goal of what you're aiming for. And I think a lot of us are struggling right now with top-down lighting, which is what's going on in this room, and it creates a lot of shadow also. So having that face, like head-on light, that's the way to go to really make it, like Molly's video actually looks really solid. You're very separated from your surroundings. Yeah. And, so you want to aim for that. You want to aim for that where you can really clearly see that you're separate from the background. That's like a nice way to have a lot of quality in your video.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Sophia? I see you there. Well, if not, then, oh.
Wow. She knew. It is. That is exactly what it is. It comes from a video game. Well, I know it from a video game that I really love called The Binding of Isaac. But it's also a symbol of a musician that means a lot to me. The double cross, or the Saint Lorraine's cross, was the symbol of this group called Frightened Rabbit. And in the next couple of weeks, I'm hoping to put out like a cover of one of their songs. So thank you for noticing that.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much, Brent. This was so great. I think everyone learned a whole lot. The video will stay up on our website or on the YouTube channel. And I recorded this Zoom session as well, so that will be put up there. So you can revisit the answers to your questions and everything else.
Thank you so much, Rachel, for having me and having this idea. And I'm really excited. I'm going to be part of the Q&A sessions going forward here and everything. So, as things come up, if I can help anybody with anything that you have technical needs wise, get in touch and we'll figure out how we can help you out.